I actually had, some people reach out to me not that long ago, actually, like some pretty big influencers who you'd be surprised that front-loaded EQ and they were having this very exact problem. What's up guys, Derek, moreplacemoreleads.com. Today we're going to be talking about EQ, also known as Equipoise or Equipoise, however you want to say it, or the actual chemical name is Boldenone, and the more common format that it is found in on the underground scene and just in general is Boldenone undeclinate. So this is a very long ester, and this compound will take a long time to work its way out of your system, and something I commonly see as a major mistake when using this compound. Well, first of all, it often is not really justified to be using at all. When most people are using it, I feel like it's a poor choice, except in like very token scenarios. Like a lot of people, when they stop it, they start their PCT like 2 weeks after, even though the half-life is like fucking 14 days or something ridiculous. So this thing is, you're looking at a clearance time of like 15, like let's 15 times 5, we're looking at 50 days. We're looking at like 70 days before this thing's cleared out of your system enough to no longer be suppressive of your HPTA, and for you to actually look at implementing a post-cycle therapy protocol in order to get your production back up to homeostasis. So if you're going to use this shit, do not start your PCT 2 weeks after thinking that it's going to get you back up to where you need to be. And this is like it sort of circles back to my video on 99% of bodybuilders have never done a real PCT. Like, how many guys are using EQ in their off seasons, and then a lot of open bodybuilders too, actually, like IFBB pros, they're like, oh yeah, I take like two to 3 months like clean out. Like I take absolutely nothing for 2 to 3 months. And it's like, bro, this shit is in your system for those 2 to 3 months. You didn't clean anything out. So yeah, just be aware of that with this compound. This is a video about how it feels, but I thought I would mention that because that's a giant mistake I see made all the time. So as far as how it feels, it doesn't feel that good, to be honest. Like, I guess if you're lucky, you will feel absolutely nothing. It's just going to feel like, a background anabolic that is pretty well tolerated. It's kind of a, it's not a heavy bloating agent, doesn't have significant interaction with mineral corticoid receptors or cause some like excessive amounts of bloating within the first couple of weeks, like its counterpart Dianabol, which is kind of interesting because this is indeed pretty much the identical chemical structure to Dianabol, except in injectable format, versus one is an oral C17AA, steroid. So for Boldenone, it behaves, pretty differently than Dianabol in that it doesn't really do that. It seems a lot less, to me, its effects are less broad spectrum in terms of it is not something that's a viable replacement for TRT. The reason being is Dianabol can aromatize into a sufficient amount of methyl estradiol to at least somewhat check off the boxes in terms of has enough androgenicity, has enough estrogenicity, has enough anabolism that it's worth using, has enough, potential to drive performance outcomes, that has many different aspects where it may be deployed that actually makes sense. Whereas Boldenone is like, it 5-alpha reduces like a minimal amount to DHB, and we like don't even know how much, it might be like next to nothing. It pretty much interacts with aromatase to produce something that we don't actually know what it is. Maybe it's, some sort of fucking analog to whatever the methyl estradiol is, but it's certainly not bioidentical estradiol, and the estrogenicity is certainly not potent enough for it to be a testosterone base, as we've seen many times where guys are getting ridiculous like low estrogen side effects despite being on like 500 mgs a test with their EQ, and their estradiols are getting crushed into the ground. And this stuff literally cross-detects estrone as whatever the fuck it is. Like we don't even know what it is because you can't pick it up in blood work, and no one has really dug into it to figure it out. We're just assuming, for some reason, it was just assumed that this shit converts into bioidentical estradiol where it doesn't whatsoever. And it would be, I feel like, ridiculous to assume that it did, considering this is a synthetic agent. So anyways, it artificially elevates estradiol via electrochemiluminescence radioimmunoassay blood test, but it's not actually estradiols, because if you get high sensitivity blood work, you'll find your estradiols in the toilet while you're on it, and it competes for aromatase or interacts with it to produce its own estrogen, which is the likely outcome, and prevents testosterone from aromatizing into estradiol to the degree it would to provide the effects you want out of your testosterone base. So often you see guys with 500 tests plus, 400 EQ or something. And for whatever reason, their E2 is in the toilet when checked via sensitive assay because the fuck, I can't even say it. The EQ is not competing, but it's going through aromatase and producing whatever like shitty estrogen it produces, and then preventing testosterone from creating its own bioidentical estradiol, consequently crushing it in your blood work. And then, if you get your estrone checked using ECLIA, you'll cross-detect estrone, which is, what we presume to be the estrogen that EQ produces, but in fact, it's also a cross detection because if you get high sensitivity testing with your estrone, you'll find your estrone is also in the toilet, and it's something else entirely different that's not bioidentical, which is something we all probably should have assumed from the get-go. Like, why would this be the only synthetic anabolic that's somehow aromatized into literally estradiol itself? It makes no sense. So, expectedly, something that is going to crush the main, most potent estrogen that you rely on for doing a whole bunch of shit in the body, it's probably going to have some downstream negative outcomes, either from a neurological context, cardiovascular context, muscle building context, a lot of different things that are not really going to be as optimized if you chose your compounds a little more, for your specific goals. Like, obviously, if you're an athlete, maybe your goals differ, and something like this may be, justified in token scenarios for very specific things. Or if you're like a hyper responder to estrogen in that you like suck at metabolizing it or something. I don't know. There are maybe token scenarios you could argue for its use, but in general, this is going to be a compound that's like pretty hit or miss in terms of its health outcomes relative to its actual benefits. So anxiety is one of the main complaints with this compound. It is something that can make you feel very, very uneasy, and you can go into the cycle. I don't know what it is about this compound in particular. Well, I guess I do know what it is. The half-life is so long that many people have been convinced that the only way for it to work properly and get the most out of it is to front load it in week 1. And now I can understand the logic there, as you think, okay, well, the half-life 14 days, I might as well get this shit in my system as quick as possible and not wait the full fucking for blood serum concentrations to spool up until like hit steady state or whatever. So I'm gonna just like front load a fuck ton of it. I see the logic. However, this can lead to an outcome where you're just fucking cranking your levels through the roof and inducing ridiculous amounts of anxiety above and beyond what you may even get if you just fucking used it, at a high dose anyways. So this compound, in general, it may be complementary in that you either have moderate, response to it, where it's like in terms of like an actual well-being context where you feel fine, there's nothing really wrong. It almost behaves sort of like a DHT derivative in that it seems to, have some sort of not antagonistic effect on estrogen. It's sort of dry in its outcomes. It seems to drive, it's not pure protein expression, but it's still like a dry gainer, and it's something that could otherwise be used to increase your overall burden of AAS per week while simultaneously reducing your estrogenic burden without the use of an AI. That's sort of why it almost like behaves similarly, besides its like effects on hematology and whatnot. And even I guess even how you would argue for its application in like a sports context, it's a bit different. But I mean, in terms of its just like dry nature and the way it interacts with like estrogen metabolism and whatnot, it's sort of like a DHT derivative. However, DHT derivatives typically have like neurological benefits in terms of motor unit recruitment and just like feel goodness and stuff like that. Whereas EQ doesn't really like make you feel good. It's like at best, you feel nothing, hopefully. And at worst, you feel crippling anxiety to the point where you want to get off it, and then you realize, oh shit, the half-life is 14 days. I now need to wait 50 plus days before it's out of my system enough for me to stop feeling these side effects, That, oftentimes it's not actually going to take 50 days, but it's going to be longer than you want it to be when you have fucking anxiety going through the roof. So I actually had, some people reach out to me not that long ago, actually, like some pretty big influencers who you'd be surprised that front-loaded EQ, and they were having this very exact problem. They were, telling me how bad their anxiety was and asking for my opinion. And I was like, you shouldn't have done it, dude. EQ, shouldn't have front-loaded the EQ, So that is my warning to you as far as EQ, is it's typically not an agent that really makes sense when there are other more like intelligent choices to make. At least for the majority of cases, it's not like every single time. However, it's a pretty like unhealthy compound in general, and it doesn't really do anything that other compounds couldn't necessarily fill the void for in almost every scenario. Obviously, there's token scenarios where maybe there's an argument not, but like I said, and then even after that, considering that is probably not the best choice for pretty much every single scenario, you get into this like mental component, as well as just like the hematology and all the other stuff that needs to be addressed with it. It's burden on the kidneys, the blah, 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 all this kind of shit that may be like overly problematic relative to other compounds that could otherwise achieve the same level of muscle growth or performance benefits with a relative lack of those things. And then you get into the mental component where it's like super volatile, where you could either at best have like pretty much like neutral effects, or it makes you anxiety ridden as fuck, versus DHT derivatives, which are like quite feel good in their nature, you know? So it's a compound I'm not like a huge fan of, to be honest, especially because the format it is sold in is like almost always this like super long ester. So if it is problematic for you, it's a very risky compound to go into. And yeah, like to be honest, it's just like how it feels doesn't, to me, it didn't feel good. So maybe you'll be different, but I mean, like, I think there are better choices out there, and it definitely isn't a feel good, like for Dianabol, which is like a, you know, clinically used for HRT replacement and has, you know, that estrogen component and whatnot, and is actually like, interestingly enough, how much they contrast each other, because one is like D-bol, like famously has that like GABAergic component. It makes you like your sense of well-being grow through the roof. You feel great, you know, super confident, life's great, except if your blood pressure is super fucking high and you didn't use it properly. But anyways, it's like a feel-good compound, whereas Boldenone, which is like chemically identical essentially, doesn't do that at all. It's not estrogenic in its nature for just like the overall compound. It's like much more problematic in that it literally decreases estrogenicity in the body a significant amount. It doesn't have that well-being effect whatsoever. In fact, it has in most cases, a negative effect on it. And it's just not as good in general. Like, it's just weird how two compounds that are so fucking similar can be so wildly different in their net effects in the body. Especially coming from like literally the same family of compounds, and being like chemically, you would think on paper, this is gonna be like the same shit, but it's like, no, little changes make a big difference, even if it's just administration format, injecting versus pinning. Or injecting versus popping a pill. That's what I meant to say. So yeah, anyways, that is, before I get too long drawn out, like honestly, that's all there is to say on it. I don't really know what else to comment. It's, I guess, drop your experiences down below. If you have used EQ, did you get the anxiety from it? Was it a feel-good compound for you? How did it compare to D-bol for you when you used it? What applications do you think it has, if any? I don't know, just in general, any kind of feedback is going to help educate new people coming in who may otherwise haphazardly jump into this compound. Like I mentioned, there are people who literally watch my channel who've seen me talk shit about this compound, who then front-loaded it and then messaged me after to tell me how they front-loaded it and experienced a bad outcome. And I was like, bro, like, watch my shit, you know? So anyways, that's the video. Please like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplatesmoredates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_moredates. Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. I'm also on this app called Parler now, which I guess is like Twitter's like competitor now. Probably going to just be like BitChute pretty much. I'm just going to throw the same shit up on there, and it's probably never going to pick up steam, but you never know. So on there too, if you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. My TRT clinic, Gorilla Mind, nootropic formulas, Gorilla Mode, pre-workout formulas I designed myself from scratch, and anything else I'm associated with, it's all in the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.